Murder stories. The sandy beaches are not as calmer in the night as they are in the day. The night turns the beaches into something else, something nobody would imagine that it could be. The playful sand turns killer in the night. This happened when I was a teenager. My family lived at the beach house, and I had the closest view to the beach. I used to stand at the balcony and look at the beach. And in the day, it was occupied by the beautiful girls, flaunting their erogenous bodies, and the ripped dudes salivating over their own bodies. I used to witness this all from my house, and there were times that there were distress on the beach, since the part of the beach in front of my house was privately owned by my father. Trespassers were not allowed in there, but we weren't really very strict about that rule, so there were no immediate consequences that were waiting anyone. But then there are moments when things were not very easy, like the time of spring breaks. The spring breakers were the wildest bunch of all. They were a menace on the beach. And at the time, when I was young, it felt like getting into those spring break parties. But then I realized soon that maybe it is not the best. Of all this happened during the spring break, when my sister had recently moved to college, and it was the first spring break. Since then, she was back at home, and we would spend days in that balcony looking at these spring breakers. And then my sister said, "These spring breakers are ridiculous. They will act in worst ways possible." I didn't believe her at the time, because that was the lifestyle that I was looking forward to. I had no idea what college kids were up to, and on the night when I was just waiting and watching things happening at the beach, and there were some boys and a couple of girls having a nice fire going on, and they were dancing and kissing, and then taking breaks from the kissing and dancing again. One of the boys saw me from the distance and asked me if I would want to join them. He shouted from the beach as he looked toward my balcony that faced them. I waved with my hand and then shouted, "I'm 15. There's time." And then they just smiled and waved, and I waved back. It was too late, and I was getting tired, so I decided to retire to my room and sleep. By the time I went back, there was just a boy and a girl on the beach. Everyone was gone. My sleep broke, and I got out of the balcony, and then I saw at the distance the boy and girl. I think they were kissing each other, or maybe about to elope, because the way they were going on each other was wild. The boy was climbing over the girl and just kept on pressing himself on girl, and he just kept doing that. The girl wasn't really saying anything, so I wasn't really suspicious at first, and I kept watching. I just wanted to make sure I get the look of the boy in case things do go wrong. There were these loud grunting noises that the boy was making, almost like a middle-aged man would. And then about 20 minutes on her, the man turned, and what I saw made me panic. When the boy turned to its right, he wasn't a boy, but rather different man with a mask on, probably in late 40s. And in his hand was the head of the girl. He took the head and kept it in the bag. And I was panicking, but I couldn't call for help. I was lying on the floor trying not to make a single noise, and from the tiny gaps of wooden railing, I saw the man keep the head in the bag and then turn the girl on her stomach, and he just left. The woman was lying there lifeless, without a head the next morning. The police, the Fed, the media, everyone arrived at the crime scene. Everyone wanted to know what happened. They were all baffled by the case. There was no evidence, no clue, and witness, except of course me, and everyone was terrified. Even my parents were terrified, and they decided that they won't be sending my sister to college on her own, and that my father would accompany her there. It was a panic all over the town, with no idea as to who killed her. I didn't come out as a witness until one of the agents of FBI pointed out something. I looked at that agent, and I saw it in his eyes that he wanted to solve the case. So I came forward with whatever I saw that night on that beach. The body was lying face down, and there were no clothes on the body. It was a young woman. There were no signs of struggle seen on the body. It would have been easier to identify the woman, but to everyone's surprise, she was missing the head. To identify the body was headless, and after a sweep of the area, the head was not to be found. The police were baffled by the case, and everyone around the lines of beach was worried there were no records of the woman, and no one could be found until the forensics would be done by it. I was new when I was assigned the case. I was a rookie, and they gave me the case. The case was not as easy as I thought it would be. It was the case with no clues, no evidence, and no witnesses, or so we thought. The cops were quick to suggest that we should close the case. I knew there was more to it. It would know certain suspects. I can be largely assumed that the perpetrator might do again what he did here, but there was the question of if there was any witnesses or not, and the police was quick to close the case and recorded that there was none. While it wasn't the whole truth, there was no witnesses on the location, but there was on the distant across the sand from where the girl was. Murdered. A set of footprints went straight toward the beach house in the distance, and though the winds had broken most of the trail of it, I narrowed it down to the beach house. I entered the beach house, and the woman answered. I wanted the whole family to be here, but she said that the father was out, taking her daughter to the college, dropping her off, and it was just her and the son there, that is, when I asked whose room is closest to the balcony. And she told me that her son's room opened right into the balcony. There it was her first witness, her son, who might have seen what happened that night. Even though the murder was late, there were some answers that the boy could have given. And then the boy came out, and I asked him about everything. Then there were details that he added that meant great deal to the case. I took the sample of the fingerprints of the kid. Without them knowing, the kid said that the last drink she took was from the boy in the spring break party she was in. I rounded up the forensic reports, and they said that the girl was sedated before being murdered. And that added to the story of the boy about the girl not screaming when she was being murdered. I decided to canvass the place of crime again to get something from there, maybe in evidence that we might have missed. I was sweeping the place and then noticed something out of the ordinary. I checked for the tides on that night. It turns out they were higher than the usual, and that there was the bleak chance that the evidence may have moved from there because of that. That meant she has good enough chance that might not even be the real place of the murder, and the body could have easily been brought by the waves. I went back to the beach house and called in the boy and asked him to place the girl exactly where he saw her. It turns out was give or take around 20 yards away from the actual position. This time I met the father of the boy and had a conversation with him, and he said he had no idea that he witnessed anything. I went on to visit the actual place of crime, and there I tried sweeping again for the evidence or just some sort of clue, however little it might be. About an hour later, I did find one. It was a tiny piece of Velcro strap buried in the sand. The night winds must have done it. I decided to give it for examination. They had the prints, but the prints were not in the system, and just because I felt it in my gut, I asked the team to match it up with the fingerprints of the kid, so they did, and turns out it was a match. It was the prints of the kid on it. The information was kept quiet, and took the piece of Velcro and decided to head to the beach house this time. The father said they didn't want us to bother his kid no more, but I had to. There was the missing link that the kid knew I had solved the case already. But there were missing pieces only the kid could have told. I showed the Velcro strap to the kid, and the kid said it looked familiar to the Velcro shot. This father's bag, as we still needed solid evidence against his father. And then I decided to pull something that I never wanted to, but I had to. I openly arrested the kid in front of his family, and they were bewildered by it. The man was angry, but what I did, and I told him that there was evidence and his prints that linked him to the murder, and then I told him that the head was found in his room in a bag, and as I said that I observed the man, and he was looking at the basement, and was awfully quiet, and then I asked them to let me check their basement, and as soon as I did that, the man made the run for it. He caved under little pressure, he ran, and the team was waiting for him outside, and then there in the basement, there was the bag in which the head was kept. Upon further investigation, that man disclosed the location, and when he arrived, there was not one, but rather 4 heads in there, and one of them of his own daughter, that he was supposed to safely drop off to the school. The very first case was one of the most sinister cases that I got to work on. I still to the day think about that family, everything the mother and the son would have gone through after that evil was exposed. Story 2. On the night of March 15th, 1989, Tracy Lynn Kirkpatrick was working at Aileen Ladies Sportswear in Frederick, Maryland. Tracy was an introverted young woman, often opting to communicate her thoughts and feelings through handwritten poetry rather than verbal conversation. She was also a bookworm and excelled in her academic life. Tracy was extremely hardworking, holding 2 retail jobs to save money to pursue a law degree at an Ivy League university. One of these jobs was at the previously mentioned sportswear store, where she was working the closing night shift on the night in question. At around 6 p.m., Tracy's mother arrived at the store to bring her daughter some dinner. She was a supportive, loving parent who often brought Tracy a plate of home-cooked food, which Tracy would then share with her colleagues on duty. She later said that nothing appeared amiss at the store and that her daughter seemed to be in a perfectly jovial mood. 2 hours later, Tracy's manager finished her shift and departed the store, as it was routine for lower employees to cash up and lock down the store at the usual closing time at 9 p.m. No sales were recorded after that point, so if there had been any visitors, they certainly hadn't bought anything from any of the clerks. After closing, one of the unit's security guards noticed that some of the store's lights were on long after they should have been turned off. At around 10:30 p.m., he entered the store to investigate the situation, concerned there might have been an intruder using the lights to steal merchandise. Having broken in using a back door, he took out his key to unlock the front entrance of the store, only to find that it was still unlocked. Deeply concerned, he thoroughly searched the front and back areas of the premises, only to make a terrifying discovery. In one of the back storage rooms lay Tracy Lynn Kirkpatrick. There was a puddle of blood beneath her unconscious body, along with stab wounds to her chest and back. The security guard then rushed to call emergency services, hoping she could still be saved. But on arrival, paramedics found that she could not be revived and announced her dead at the scene. Police then arrived to cordon off the area so that a forensic examination could be undertaken. Tragically, Tracy's parents were also on their way to the store, concerned that their daughter was having car trouble and might need a ride back home. When they arrived on the scene and saw the blue flashing lights of police cars, they feared the worst. It is unimaginable how painful it must have been for them to have their worst nightmares confirmed. Their only daughter had been murdered by some mysterious assailant. Throughout the investigation that followed, Frederick's homicide detectives failed to identify any singular motive for her slaying. The cash in the store's registers was still present. Tracy had not been indecently assaulted. nor did she appear to have any obvious enemies who might wish to see her come to harm. There was no evidence of any chase or struggle, which suggested that Tracy knew her murderer as they approached to fatally wound her. Yet, not a single person working at the store that day had seen anything suspicious or could suggest anyone they thought to be guilty of such a horrific crime. Investigators were completely and utterly flummoxed. That was until 3 months later, when a person called into the U.S. National Confessional Hotline. A recording of the call was made, which reads as follows. "Hello, my name is Dawn, and I'm calling from Frederick, Maryland. I know this is going to sound surprising, but 3 months ago, I stabbed a girl to death. You might think that by making this tape, I'm setting myself up to be caught. But there are a lot of guys named Dawn in Frederick. The girl I killed was working in a ladies' sportswear store. I often came by and talked to her when she was working alone, and one night when she was in the storeroom, and we were talking, our conversation turned into an argument. So, I took out a knife I had with me at all times, and I killed her. A few days later, I realized I had created a lot of sadness, and I thought about turning myself into the police, but whatever they do to me, they won't bring Tracy back. So, I've decided that I better keep free, because we have the death penalty in Maryland. Thanks for listening. I'm sorry about what I did, but nothing can change it." Staff from the confession hotline forwarded a copy of the recording to Frederick Police. The call was traced back to a place called Walkersville, a small town in the same county, just less than 10 miles away from Aileen Ladies Sportswear. 2 weeks after the call, a self-proclaimed psychic telephoned Frederick Police, informing them that their investigation should center around a man she only referred to as Sean. She claimed the Sean character was acting strangely regarding the case, going as far as sending her clippings from newspapers and asking her bizarre and probing questions about Tracy Lynn Kirkpatrick. Apparently willing to follow up any lead, no matter how ridiculous sounding, Frederick Police descended into Walkersville, where they played the audio recording of the confession to various members of the public in hopes that they might be able to identify the voice on the tape. As it turned out, several people recognized the voice on the tape as neither a Sean nor a Dawn, saying it belonged to someone whose identity was never made public by investigators. This man was never arrested or formally charged with Tracy Lynn Kirkpatrick's murder, and despite thorough searches of his property and his complete lack of an alibi, he was subsequently ruled out as a suspect. Essentially, the identity of Tracy Lynn Kirkpatrick's killer is a complete mystery. But there is one interesting detail that seems to have been completely overlooked by law enforcement. There was a man named Don present at the sportswear store that night, the same security guard who apparently stumbled across Tracy's body. His name is Don Barnes Jr., and his father is none other than Don Barnes Sr., who was actually the sheriff of Frederick County at the time of Kirkpatrick's murder. Despite him being one of the only people present at the time she was murdered, Don Barnes Jr. has never been considered a suspect. This could easily be because whoever committed the murder was well aware of Don's presence in the area on the night of the murder and sought to implicate him. But even if this was the case, surely Don would have faced some form of casual questioning, given that no one else was present when Tracy Lynn Kirkpatrick's body was found. Apparently he didn't, and many have alleged that this is because Don Barnes Jr. was actually a prime suspect whose involvement was completely covered up by his sheriff father. However, these allegations of nepotism are exactly that, purely allegations. Since no single person has been charged or implicated in the crime in any serious way, the case remains and may forever remain unsolved.